Please state your name for the court.
I'm Dr. Campbell Solo.
And where do you work, Dr. Solo?
Right now, I have my own associate firm, Solo & Associates.
And what is your educational background?
Well, I got my master's degree, or I got my undergraduate degree in 1991 from Oregon University. I got my medical degree in 1995 from Michigan University. I completed my general psychiatry residency in 1998, and I completed my special residency in child and adolescent psychology in 2001.
All right, can you tell us a little bit about your licenses, certifications, and personal memberships, Dr. Solo?
I'm licensed to practice here in Midlands and also in Missouri.
And can you also describe a little bit of your work experience for the court?
I was the general psychiatry resident at Breckenridge County Medical Center. I have also been the adjunct professor down at Midlands State University, and I taught a few classes down there in psychiatry.
What kind of psychology do you specialize in?
I specialize in child and adolescent psychiatry.
How are you connected to this case, Dr. Solo?
I am being retained by Andy and Lee Park.
And what kind of questions did the Parks ask you to look at in this case?
There are two specific questions that I'm looking at in this case. The first one is whether Jesse Duran posed a specific risk in regards to firearms. The second question is whether warning signs of that risk manifested themselves before August 18, 2010.
Were you able to reach a conclusion?
I was.
All right, before we talk about your conclusions, what materials did you use in order to conduct your analysis?
I relied upon the affidavits of Andy Park, Danny Brooks, Aiden Duran, as well as Exhibits 8, 9, 10, and 13.
Was there anything else that could have helped your analysis that you were unable to access?
No, not to my knowledge. There was nothing else that could help.
And do your conclusions rely upon a reasonable level of certainty based on the accepted standards in your field?
Yes, I rely on numerous peer-reviewed articles as well as my own background and education to come to these conclusions.
All right, let's begin to talk about your conclusions, Dr. Solo. What are the accepted, in your field, what are the risk factors of violence to children in your opinion, Dr. Solo?
Well, there are 6 risk factors that we look at in children of whether they have violent risk factors. The first one is hereditary factors, like what their genetics might be, if their parents might have been violent. The second one is if they might be victims of violence or sexual assault. The third one is exposure to violence in the media, whether there's any particularly violent video games or just even television of particularly violent acts. Fourth one is a stressful home life, if anyone might be being bullied in them or any particular use of drug habits by their parents. Fifth one is previous violent acts, whether they have in the past conducted anything unseemly violently. And the sixth one is exposure to firearms.
All right, which of these risk factors were present in Jesse Duran's life before August 18th?
In my investigation, I discovered 3 of them. Exposure to violence in the media, previous aggressive behavior, and to a lesser extent, presence of firearms.
All right, let's talk about the first factor, exposure to violence in the media. What effect does exposure to violence in the media have on children?
Well, if we're talking about media in general, it can numb the child to the violence. They can become kind of used to it. They can start to accept violence as a reasonable answer to their problems, and they can become accepting of violence.
What evidence did you find that Jesse had been exposed to extensive violence in the media?
Well, in my investigation, I noticed numerous testimonies in all of the affidavits that Jesse had been playing just abhorrently violent video games.
All right, let's move on to talk about previous aggressive or violent behavior. What evidence did you find that Jesse had previously engaged in aggressive or violent behavior?
Well, for this, I looked at specifically a notice of student discipline that Aiden Duran had received previously from Jesse's school. It outlined that Jesse's behavior he had been like punching and kicking kids. It's all very violent behavior.
And did your investigation show that Hayden Durant knew about Jesse's previous violent behavior?
Of course, at the bottom of that particular document I was just speaking of, Hayden Durant actually signs it and says he acknowledges everything that had been happening.
So in your expert opinion, did Hayden Durant possess enough information to be aware of Jesse's violent tendencies and take steps to address them?
Well, in particular, I definitely think that Hayden Durant had more than enough information to come to these conclusions that Jesse was a very violent child and that he had a huge amount of time to correct these behaviors.
All right, let's talk about the last risk factor, the presence of firearms. How was Jesse exposed to firearms in his life?
It is my understanding that Jesse's primary exposure to firearms came through the Park family's firearm that they kept in their home.
And was Hayden Durant aware of the Park's gun?
No, he was not.
When do you believe Hayden Durant did become aware that they had a gun in their home?
From my investigation, I would say that it was very shortly before the accident. Hayden Durant didn't really know about it up until the day in question.
All right, what steps did was Hayden aware that Jesse wanted to play with the Park's gun?
I wouldn't say that he was fully aware of exactly the implications of what Jesse wanted, whether that he wanted to actually do what he did, but I would say he had some inkling of that.
All right, what were the efforts that Hayden Durant used to address Jesse's behavior the night before, saying that he wanted to play with the gun, sufficient, in your opinion?
No, I would not. I would caution any parent of a child with violent behavior to take them immediately to a professional health institute. The fact that Hayden Durant didn't even caution the Parks that Jesse had these behaviors when there was a gun in the house, this is obviously inadequate.
All right, no further questions here, right?
Bear with me, Your Honor.
While Brent is getting ready.